All right, well, let me actually, we're about to take the next step in a long journey towards our Port of Excellence project at Champlain. We said we'd take no prisoners. We're taking no prisoners. We said we wouldn't take no for an answer. We haven't taken no for an answer yet. Failure is not an option. We're going to keep saying that. Most importantly, we're going to keep saying that in Washington because that's where it needs to be said. Before we get to the kind of the purpose of asking you here today, let me just try to quickly cover and acknowledge the progress that we've made. Because I also want to make sure that everybody is kind of on has the same picture of the steps that have been covered and that you're aware of the things that have occurred since last fall. This whole effort began with the first ever border summit at Champlain last fall, organized by Congressman John McHugh, which for the very first time at Champlain called together at the top levels the major U.S. border agencies there, together with the Congressman, together with our coalition, to start addressing and recognizing the growing crisis at Champlain, the need to come together on a common vision. It went forward from there. We had already begun and continued through last fall to pull together, I suggest, what's become a very remarkable coalition of interest from Montreal to Albany. Every major chamber, every major trucking company, every major economic development agency, places like the Port of Montreal, business interests, customs brokers, government agencies, Quebec, Canada, New York State, federal agencies, together in one grand coalition that now numbers over 400 entities, all joined in endorsing this project as the #1 transportation priority within the Champlain-Hudson corridor. Very important. It's not a Champlain project, not a Plattsburgh project, not a North Country project. This is a bi-national, corridor-wide regional project, and that has been heard, and that was important to lending us that political base to go to Washington and punch above what is usually our lack of weight as people here in the North Country. As a result of the Congressman's efforts last fall, we pulled together a working group that on a very tight time schedule got a grant application into the Federal Highway Administration under the Corridors and Borders program. Very limited amount of funding available there, $150 million nationwide, 2/3 of that was pre-earmarked by Congress, which means really only about $50 million available nationwide. And you can imagine the thousands of proposals that we had. We didn't have high hopes for that, but it did help us get our act together at the time. We did get that application in, and as we now know, it won. Regular trips to Washington, we're now going down there routinely every 2 months, and if we need to go down more frequently as things occur, we will continue to do that. We have, as you know, arranged a literal parade of visits to the border, getting the highest level officials and decision makers that we need to get up there to see the facility firsthand, to understand the crisis, to understand the situation, and to make our case heard. They include Senator Schumer. They included getting the Federal Highway Administration up here for the first time, which I suggest was a precursor to our success on this grant application. Senator Moynihan's staff, a number of other key congressional staff up here from Washington. State DOT Commissioner Joseph Boardman, who since that visit, I can tell you, has become one of our most active advocates and partners in this effort. Visiting makes a difference. Seeing the situation up there makes a difference. It's eye-opening to people. They hear about, oh, this border crossing's got a problem, that one's got a crossing. They're telling me they've got a problem. Oh, they all have problems. Big deal. You get them up here and they realize that we have a very different problem here. Quebec officials, etc. We began to move up the priority chain. Late in the fall, it became very clear that the agencies that were saying a year ago, well, yeah, I guess there really is a problem there. We'll see if we can take a look at it and get you in the pipeline for 5 years from now. Are now saying, no, you're in the pipeline now. We're doing everything we can. In fact, we're trying to keep up with the pressure that's being put on them to respond to the situation. We got a plan and a preliminary number, $23 million out of GSA early this year because of this pre-work that was done. We were endorsed by the governor as one of the state's priority issues in Washington. The governor has been an active partner. The state of New York, if you don't know, has an Office of Federal Affairs in Washington, which really is the state's official lobbying team in Washington. They're working with us every time we go down there. We use their office, they support us, they set up meetings. You might wonder what the governor had to do with action in Washington. Well, the governor and his people have been very helpful in Washington and continue to be. We'll be meeting with them again during this visit. We testified before the House Transportation Appropriations Committee in February. We asked for $6 million. We're continuing to work on that. And keeping our fingers crossed, and more than keeping our fingers crossed, going down there and restating our case to hopefully see that come true this fall. And then, as you know, just a couple of months ago, we got the $1.078 million released by GSA for work this year, something that seemed impossible a few months earlier, according to everything we were hearing from them. Suddenly it became clear we were being heard, and they were turning up numbers even in excess of $1 million somewhere out of somehow. It shows they have the capacity to do things. There's enough pressure, and you make your case strong enough, suddenly, lo and behold, when $1 million can appear to do something this year that they said a couple of months ago wasn't possible. I think that's a remarkable indication of the effect we're having. Customs more recently threw in 180,000. Immigration and Naturalization threw in 30,000 to top up that 1.078 million because it became clear that the interim measures to be done weren't all going to be able to be done within that number as they planned it and got final numbers. So the agency stepped forward and topped up that number to make sure nothing got put off. Next month we'll be breaking ground sometime at Champlain for several interim measures up there that, as I said before, they aren't going to fix the situation, they're going to make it less awful in the near term. But making something less awful is at least better than doing nothing. We'll include a third truck booth. That construction will start next month. And now, as we heard on Friday, we did get that $400,000 from the Corridors and Borders program that we applied for through state transportation last fall. It shows things are working. Both Congressman Sweeney and Congressman McHugh went directly to the administrator of the Federal Highway Administration in December to lobby for that. Senator Schumer also has actively lobbied for that. Senator Moynihan organized the whole state delegation to do a joint letter to Federal Highway about the need for funding under that program. So another $400,000. You add this up, we're approaching $2 million. Well, there's still at least $21 million to go, and that's the next step. None of these steps have been easy. They've all been difficult, but they've all been successful. But now the toughest part comes. Now we go after the big enchilada, the full authorization, the full funding, the big picture beyond those initial interim steps that we've been working on. I want you to understand what the process is that's underway now. And I want you to understand we're working this on a two-track approach in terms of our strategy and our approach to this whole thing. There's an official way and there is an unofficial way. The official way to get projects like this done in Washington is that you get Congress to, first of all, authorize them. There's an authorization process that says, all right, the agency has given us a plan and numbers. We think this is important. We as the Congress are going to put this in that agency's authorization bill. And that says, you have our blessing, you can go forward and do this work up to this amount of money, and that project is authorized. The official way things happen in Washington, supposedly, is that you only get appropriations for things that are authorized. So we're working that track. Authorization right now is at this status. We got the initial plans. There's now an interagency task force working with GSA and their engineering firm, Kelsey and Edwards out of Saratoga, to take the next step to do the full final design concept cost estimates for the Port of Excellence at Champlain. The next step of that's supposed to be done by the end of August. We are then looking for GSA to forward what is called a prospectus for the project, means the full outline of what this project entails, to Congress by the end of the year. Then we will be looking for Congress to fully authorize a Port of Excellence, $23 million or whatever that final number ends up being in 2001, and then carry through with appropriations to back that up. That's the official process. It should be obvious from some of the things I mentioned that we're not relying just on the official process. We understand Washington enough to know that sometimes projects get authorized and there never are any appropriations. Last year, Senator Moynihan got authorization for 500 more customs agents on the northern border. No appropriations followed. So we don't want that scenario. We also know that sometimes appropriations happen without authorization because some congressmen are in a position to get money in an appropriations bill even though the project hasn't been authorized. They basically say to the appropriations, here's the money and you will spend it on that. So we're working that track as well, which is why we went ahead down there this year and are pushing for appropriations this year ahead of authorization. We work at the official way, we're also working at the unofficial way. But that's where the process is in terms of what's happening with GSA officially and how the authorization process will unfold. We intend to keep on top of that. We want to make sure that the plan that comes out of this process now underway is not one iota less than our vision of a Port of Excellence. No compromise. We're not going to compromise on a thing. We've been compromising in Champlain for 30 years. We're not compromising anymore. That's the vision. Find the money, guys. That's the message. And we're going to stay, we promise we're going to stay on top of that and make sure there's no backsliding or none of the critical elements fall out of that plan because somebody doesn't want to spend that much money. The spending is fully justified. We also continue to work with the northern side of the equation. We've been working actively with the Quebec Transport Ministry. We had the pleasure last month of meeting with the Quebec Transport Minister, Guy Chevret, and we'll be returning later this week to follow up with them. We've met with Transport Canada. We've been in touch with the Canadian Consul General in Buffalo. We have the solid support of several key partners in Canada, Montreal International, which is the regional economic development agency for Montreal, Port of Montreal, Quebec Trucking Association, Canadian Pacific, and several other key partners who are being very helpful up there. It's important because, as you've seen the drawing of this in the past, whatever is done there has to be coordinated and is also going to require some investment on the Quebec and Canadian side. And so we've been pushing very hard and doing a lot of spade work to get them ready. They're committed. This is very urgent to them, even more than to us in some respects. But we've been doing that spade work, making our case, and we will keep up those contacts as well. That brings us to today. Today, the Chamber and the Coalition leave again for Washington and for Quebec City this week. Among the various companies and interests that will be joining us in Washington for various meetings over the next 2 days are the State Business Council, the Albany Colony Regional Chamber, affirming that this is a corridor-wide project, the Quebec Ministry of International Affairs. Their people will be accompanying us all day Wednesday in our congressional meetings on behalf of the province of Quebec. The National Treasury Employees Union, who is represented here today. We thank them for their support and assistance. Canadian Pacific, Georgia Pacific Corporation, UPS, World Duty Free, CARP, Adirondack Bank, and we are still getting some contacts today of some people who are going to arrange to join us down there. So this is a delegation. We're going to start to make the case that it's not just me sitting in the room with them, but we're going to increasingly have a strong business interest and representatives with us whenever we go down there.
Gary, who are you going to talk to, and what are you going to tell them?
Well, we have 2 days of meetings and consultations planned. We're going to be meeting with our key partners, of course, to update our strategies, to get insight on where things are at, and most important, just to make sure we convey the heightened sense of urgency in terms of safety in light of the most recent accident. We'll be meeting with Senator Schumer, Congressman McHugh, Congressman Sweeney. We will be meeting with several other members for the first time of the state delegation, Congressman Walsh from Syracuse, several others that we expect to see on Wednesday morning to emphasize this is a statewide problem and an issue that we need the whole delegation to come together on. We'll be meeting with U.S. Customs. What we'll really basically be saying to U.S. Customs, first of all, we'll be continuing the dialogue about the project, and they are the lead agency among the federal border agencies in the design of this project right now, so we need to stay in close touch with them. But we also, and I had a conversation with them in setting up this meeting, we also have challenged them to step back and do some additional brainstorming about interim measures up there. We have a critical, tragic situation in Champlain. It's a disgrace, it's an embarrassment, it's life-threatening. We're now asking people not only to wait in line and to be delayed and to suffer inconvenience in trying to do business in this corridor, we're now in effect asking them to take their lives in their hands to come through Champlain. And I just don't know how to explain that away anymore. The morning after that accident, we were with 30 companies in Montreal at a breakfast meeting talking to them about doing business in this corridor and about how business-friendly and open Plattsburgh is as Montreal's U.S. suburb. Well, you don't take your life in your hands to drive through a gateway to get to a suburb. And they're asking those questions, and we're losing business here. But we're losing business for a good reason, because I'm not sure if I was a company, I could send my guys down that road, wondering if I was putting their lives at risk. I might be thinking about sending them somewhere else, or might be thinking about holding back. The only message we can give them is we're working hard on this, we will get it fixed, we're making progress, be patient with us. Don't make decisions in the short term about not doing business here because of the current situation. We promise we'll stay on top of this, but we need to keep convincing them of that because the word is out there. The word is getting out. Champlain is a dangerous port. It's not just an inconvenient port, it's a dangerous port that you might not want to send your people through. And what a terrible, terrible situation that is, and what a terrible commentary that is, frankly, on the entire U.S. government. That it has a facility like that a friendly neighboring country has to now regard it and think of it in that way. And that should heighten the urgency in Washington about doing some things. So we're going to be asking Customs to think outside the box. Don't limit themselves to the facility. Yes, some interim things have been done to help, again, make things less awful. We're going to break ground on some structural things to make things less awful. But we've got to break out of that facility and start thinking about other things. I don't know what they are, but some ideas have been thrown out. Do we need a temporary truck compound somewhere on the other side of this border and escort trucks there so we get the lines off Quebec 15, do things outside of the facility? Do we need to create something on the other side of the border and send personnel up there? Do we need to have personnel working the line instead of the booth? Do we need to have some personnel reassigned on an emergency basis to Champlain to deal with this? This is a federal disaster. It's a federal facility that is experiencing disasters. That's a federal disaster. And the federal government responds to other kinds of disasters. They find personnel and resources to send there. We have had 2 disasters, and there's another disaster in the making. We're just going to be challenging them to step back and think of things that can be done over the next couple of years that are out of the norm, but the situation is out of the norm. And I suggest, and I have heard universally from everybody we've talked to, everybody is appropriately fearful that another accident is on its way. They now realize that November wasn't a fluke. That when you put several miles of trucks on a superhighway, a high-speed superhighway, and turn into a truck parking lot, collisions are going to happen. It is going to happen again. The question is it going to happen tonight, or is it going to happen in 6 months? Is it going to happen tonight and tomorrow night? And what if? We need to start realizing some of these scenarios. I frankly think it's critical enough, and I know our friends from the building trades, who include the Teamsters, think it's critical enough. One trucker's life should be enough to regard it as a disaster and something to avoid. We should treasure each one of those working men's lives that are now being put at risk because of our facility and the failure of the U.S. government to do what it needs to do to have the kinds of facilities and staffing there to run a gateway the way it should be operated. But imagine this now. You've heard me say this before. This port treats motor coaches how? A motor coach is a truck at this port. What if next time it's a motor coach full of people at the end of that line when that truck comes down the road? And what if it's a tanker truck full of chemicals or flammable liquids? This is a terrible, terrible hazard we have at this port, and we need a response that is appropriate for the level of hazard there. We're not just talking about, oh, well, it's inconvenience. We'll make it a little less inconvenient, but the rest will just have to suffer the inconvenience while we build the facility. None of us want to wake up some Monday morning and be talking to you folks about that burned motor coach, or that blown-up tanker truck that maybe took out 20 trucks up there, or that family, people returning from Montreal this summer that got caught between the trucks. And every one of those things is just as likely to happen as just a coincidence that so far it's only been a truck hitting a truck. Pure coincidence. In fact, it almost makes it more likely the next time it's going to be something different, if you just want to think about the chances of things. So that's what we'll be talking about customs about. We'll be talking about the appropriations and the strategy and an update and where we're at and how we're going to get those appropriations with all of our political partners and try to make some new political partnerships. We also will be visiting the Canadian Embassy, but let me come back to that. On Thursday, we will be going directly from Washington to Quebec City for urgent consultations with the Quebec Transport Ministry. Similar kind of thinking. How do we make this situation more safe in the near term? I know they're thinking of things. I know they're appalled and shocked at the situation. But we want to go share in that discussion with them about things that can be done on 15, again, in the near term on their part to try to manage the situation that our U.S. government has created for them. And it's not their responsibility. They have a responsibility to try to respond to it and manage it. But I refuse the entreaties of some to say, well, that's a safety situation on the other side of the border. That's really their problem. No, let's take it back to the source. It's the U.S. government's problem.
How do you see Canada helping, Gary?
I think they need to be looking at just critical traffic management things. And again, they need to do some brainstorming. Maybe we need, and again, these are just some ideas that have been thrown out. And they may be impractical, but people will come up with other ideas. Maybe at peak times we need to get the motor coaches off 15. So that scenario I just mentioned doesn't happen. Maybe they need to open that back up and let those motor coaches go over through Rouse's Point, which at one time they used to be able to do, just to avoid a catastrophe until we can make that port ready. Maybe they need electronic signage, a whole lot of it, bilingual, by the way, to accommodate the American drivers that are coming down that highway. And I know that's a difficult issue for them to grapple with, but we're going to discuss that on Thursday. We're going to be looking for what their thinking is on measures to avoid another catastrophe. And encourage them, together with the Quebec Trucking Association and other interests, to do that. So that's what we'll be doing Thursday. We have one new tool, which is a video produced with the help of Mr. Leduc here, and also with some contributed footage from WPTZ and some help from others that I want to just run for you. We have already started distributing this. We'll be distributing it particularly to all of the congressional offices in Washington from the state, together with some other supporting material, trying to help create that picture and get the word out that they should be supporting John McHugh and John Sweeney and Senator Schumer in the appropriations efforts that they're doing here. find that fact one of the most interesting. I don't know you're aware of. Champlain is the 15th most important port, land, sea, or air, in North America.
Champlain, New York was a big port in 1967. It was a big port in 1975, and in 1999 and 2000, it is a giant port. Our biggest problem today is that we're working with the same tools that we had in 67, the same tools we had in 75, and it's time that they be updated. Customs, immigration, the Border Patrol, they've worked hard. They're working long hours. The employees there are all working overtime hours to try to keep up with the onslaught of new business. They can't do it without new tools and human resources. They need new tools in a physical plant.
We know from a study conducted by the Chamber of Commerce in Plattsburgh that Canada and our neighbors in Quebec impact the economy just in the immediate Plattsburgh area to the tune of $1.4 billion U.S. each and every year. That is all dependent on this port. That ripples up and down through New York State and almost the entire country. In fact, it probably would amaze most people to know that the border and border crossings such as this one are no longer just a near-border phenomenon in terms of their impact. 35 of the 50 states in the U.S. now have as their main commercial trading partner Canada. And that means that their economies of 35 of those states are to a large measure dependent on trade being processed in an efficient, effective way through ports like this.
The world is choosing the Can-Am pipeline that stretches from Montreal to New York City. Last year, our border was responsible for more than $1.25 billion in trade in Clinton County alone. But the artery is clogged. Our Champlain Border's infrastructure is outdated. Only 2 truck lanes for hundreds of trucks. Traffic backs up for miles. Understaffing provides a perfect opportunity for drugs and illegal goods to enter our country. We need to make our Champlain Border crossing a port of excellence.
What you can see here is almost as if we stepped back in time and we went back to 1967, because the amazing thing is this facility doesn't look much different today than it did then, even though the world has changed and the use of this facility has changed. You see 2 booths behind me handling all the truck traffic that's surging through here. There were 2 booths here in 1967 when this facility was built. That's all there is here today. There are only 2 lanes coming into this facility for passenger and truck traffic. That's the way it was in 1967, still the way it is today. Motor coaches, buses are treated as trucks at this port, which is astounding. They come through these same 2 booths, mixed in with the trucks, no segregated facility, same as it was in 1967, one of the few ports where that's the case. No compound area, no broker village, nothing here to handle commercial traffic.
We have a fuel oil customer right now who brings product in from Canada and has to sit at the border for several hours, 3, 4, 5 hours before they can get the shipments cleared. And they bring in hundreds of shipments per week. Now, this is a time delay not only for the drivers, but more importantly, the fact remains we need this fuel oil in the United States right now. Not just for the North Country, but all of the U.S. is facing what supposedly is a shortage. We have fuel oil held up at the border, not because there's a problem with it. The simple problem is Customs can't get to it with the tools they have. They can only work so fast to clear this product.
We need a major, and I mean major, expansion and modernization of this port. The fact is that this port has reached the point of almost total dysfunction at times. Almost routinely now, we have times each day when the truck traffic backs up for 5 to 6 miles on Quebec Highway 15, the equivalent of an interstate highway in the U.S., turning it into a truck parking lot. We already had our first fatal accident in November. I hate to say it, but there's going to be more of those when you turn a superhighway into a truck parking lot. We need to segregate the trucks from the passenger traffic with a new border crossing just for trucks west of the present border crossing. We need a major commercial compound and processing area for the trucks and commercial traffic separate from the passenger area. We need 8 booths to handle trucks, not 2 booths. We need a broker village where the brokers and agencies can be headquartered and conduct their business. We need modern communications and technology at this port. We have a facility of the 1960s with technology of the 1970s servicing traffic and commercial demands of the 21st century. We need to change all of those things.
We have ports of entry all along the U.S.-Canadian border, and In watching the port grow from day one, that's all we have seen is bigger numbers of shipments for several reasons. You've got more demand for Canadian product because they have wonderful products. You have an exchange rate that's very favorable to the U.S. buyer. You have a thriving U.S. economy. We don't know how long the economy will stay thriving as it is, but we do know that the exchange rate in Canada is not going to change in the near future. We do know the demand for their product will continue because it's a wonderful product. And as long as that demand is here, these border crossings are going to have to be brought up to snuff so that we can get these products through quickly. We can't have trucks sitting at the border for 3, 4, 5, and even 7 hours waiting for customs clearance. We need more people on the line from customs, and we need better facilities. They have done a great job with what they have had, but they need better, and they need more.
Obviously, it's going to be supplemented with recent information about that second accident. As we distribute that. And now I want to turn to...
Gary, that's a nice piece.
Yeah, nice piece. Well, thank you for that.
But that should say something down there. That's for people that don't know this.
You got some great camera work from a certain guy here.
But for people that don't know the situation,
Yes.
I think that tells.
Picture tells 1,000 words.
I really like that. Good job.
We had the information now from this most recent accident, and it just heightens the urgency. It's
Yeah.
all of that now, plus something new. And speaking of something new, part of what we will be doing in Washington tomorrow, at 3:30 in the afternoon, I will be visiting the Embassy of Canada in Washington. I will be meeting with representatives of the embassy, including Mr. John Allen, their political counsel, and we will be hand-delivering a letter addressed on behalf of our coalition and the people of the North Country and the people of the United States, frankly. If someone needs to take it on their shoulders to speak for everyone, we'll do that. To the people and government of Canada. I'd like to read this, if I may, and then I will give each of you a copy of it in advance of tomorrow's presentation. To the people and government of Canada, perhaps more than any other region of the United States, the people of Plattsburgh, North Country, the people of the Plattsburgh, North Country region of New York State have long enjoyed a deep and abiding connection with the people of Canada. And though commonly recognized in the form of the enormous and rapidly expanding economic partnership across our border, it is actually far more profound. The people of Canada are our neighbors and friends, our partners and colleagues, our heritage and our future. Even more profoundly, the people of Canada are our family. With this in mind, the recent tragedies at our Champlain Border crossing are far more than regrettable accidents in the news. They are far more than a threat to the economic hopes and dreams that depend so increasingly on safe and speedy commerce across that invisible line between us. They are a source of genuine grief on the part of everyone in our region because they represent two terrible tragedies which have taken the lives of members of our shared family and which have forever impacted the lives of those closest to them. The border we also proudly refer to as the longest, friendliest border in the world is one whose gateway should especially embody our relationship as neighbors, friends, partners, and family. Indeed, in a nation whose character has been largely symbolized by such towering images as the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, we as a people must surely expect our gateways, including Champlain, to not only fulfill all of our legal, ethical, constitutional, and economic responsibilities, but to also represent our history, character, and excellence as a nation. We have clearly failed in this responsibility, and in so doing, we have failed both ourselves and our neighbors. As a nation, we have forgotten what such gateways should mean, and we have failed to provide the resources and attention required to fulfill our responsibilities. And as a region, we were for too long complacent and unaware, allowing a situation at Champlain to develop and worsen until we now face a daily threat to life and safety. We pledge to redouble the vigorous efforts now underway to correct the physical deficiencies at our Champlain border crossing, creating a port of excellence, which will not only be conducive to efficient and safe exchange between our two peoples, but which will reestablish that essential link between our nation's gateways and our nation's character, image, and heritage. We call upon the entire United States Congress and all involved agencies of the government of the United States to come together and fully address not only the serious needs and life-threatening conditions at Champlain, but to make our U.S.-Canadian boundary a continuous border of excellence from end to end, so that we might truly serve our national interests, meet our national responsibilities, and restoke the symbolic fires of that flame held aloft by the lady in the harbor in New York. Most importantly of all, we take it upon our shoulders to apologize for the conditions at a facility of our government, which have now been responsible for the creation of a situation leading to the loss of life of 2 of our Canadian brothers. And we express and extend our deepest and most sincere condolences to the people of Canada and to the families and friends of those who have been lost. We are one family, and our family is now poorer for the tragic loss of 2 of its members. Let us commit to accelerating all possible action, resources, and creativity from both sides of the border to achieve our vision and to hopefully avoid further tragedies at our shared meeting place. And that will be delivered on behalf of the Plattsburgh North Country Chamber of Commerce, the Champlain Hudson Corridor Coalition, and the Committee of 100 Plus for a Port of Excellence at Champlain. Questions?
Is this due, I mean, I know you've been talking about the improvements at the border for a while, but is this due because of the recent accident? Is this release because of this?
Yes. Yes. I mean, there are 2 of our neighbors from our neighboring country who now have died because of conditions at our border crossing. Somebody needs to step forward and say, we're sorry. We're responsible. And we're going to do our best to fix it. But you start down a road like this by acknowledging your failures and by at least stepping forward and saying, we're sorry that it happened. We share your grief. We're going to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen again. But first of all, we acknowledge responsibility.
John McHugh has just come up with some money.
The $400,000 that was awarded by Federal Highway on Friday certainly helps. It will add to the $1.78 million. It will allow a little additional work there this summer on the interim measures. It will allow some additional widening of the entryway within the compound. All of that, as I said up front, is all good news. It will let us make the situation less awful in the near term. More importantly, it shows we're being heard. None of these things would have happened without the campaign that's underway and without the folks like Congressman McHugh and Senator Schumer who have been lending us voice in Washington. So it shows we're having an effect and gives us encouragement that we're following the right tack. So let's keep going down there. Let's keep up the pressure. Let's keep telling our story. If we keep doing that, we can hopefully make those next leaps and bounds where we get past talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars and get into the tens of millions that we need to make this happen. 23 million tentatively. As I said, this fall we'll have a final plan, a final figure. That number is likely to change somewhat, but it should remain in that ballpark.
You got about 2 now?
I'd say we've got about $2 million committed to this project. That's not shabby for 6 months of effort, starting from point zero where everybody was saying, no, it can't be done. It's not even in the pipeline. We'll get back to you in a couple of years to having a groundbreaking about to occur up there. But more importantly, again, having the attention. Now, it's unfortunate that that attention has been heightened in the last couple of weeks because of a second truck accident. That perhaps, as too many things do, it takes tragedy to really focus attention on things. But nevertheless, we've had tragedy. It's appropriate that we do heighten the urgency and try to accelerate things. And we're going to be conveying that story because, again, I can't tell you again how much it scares the life out of me to think what that next accident's going to be. And I can tell you, these guys that work up there in the line, they don't want to see smoke up that road some morning and hear that it's a motor coach or hear that it's a group of senior citizens from the North Country.
They could be in
Montreal. It could happen. Of course, I'd suggest one more trucker happening is tragic enough.
What about school buses? Are they in that line too?
Sure, they sure are. They're going on a field trip. They're in that line. Sure. I'll tell you something else. These senior citizens that are going up for prescription drugs, they're being bussed up there. They're coming back in that line. Some congressmen in Washington want to explain how those folks went up there to get their prescriptions in Canada and came back and died in a fiery crash. I mean, if these images make folks uncomfortable in Washington, they darn well should make some people uncomfortable.
But isn't the devil's advocate position that those would, even if you had 8 lines open, a truck could still hit the back of another truck?
No, because our goal here, and this is why I said we are not going to compromise. Our goal here is a port facility that under no circumstances, under any of the predictions that we have for traffic increases up there over the next 20 years, will not be able to suck those trucks in off of 15 so that there are no truck backups. In fact, ideally, what we're looking for is that the trucks will be taken off of 15 and come across a totally separate crossing. and motor coaches will be with the passenger cars and also be handled separately. That we're not going to mix that traffic up anymore, and we're not going to back trucks up on 15. There should not be one single truck sitting on 15 when we're done with this vision. And if there is, we failed. It means somewhere along the line we allowed the vision to be compromised. So you're right, as long as there's trucks there, which is the unfortunate thing now that you know, we can take some satisfaction that we're going to construct another booth up there. We're hopefully going in the weeks ahead to come up with some other ways to try to reduce the threat up there and reduce those lines. But you know, that first accident happened with a 1 mile line. The second one happened with a 2 mile line. So I mean, if you turn the 5 or 6 mile lines at peak times down to a half mile line, is the risk any less? It probably is a little less, but there's still too much of a risk there. We've got to get to the end vision of getting those trucks totally off 15. And I'm hoping that maybe there are even some creative ways with some conversation and some brainstorming in the weeks ahead, that even ahead of that facility, there are some things that Customs and INS can agree to do outside of the box. And it means them putting aside some of their procedures and their regulations and all of the reasons that they can come up with why they can't do things that way, but to weigh that against the threat to life and figure, you know, well, maybe we ought to do things differently in the interim because we don't want to face that. So I hope with some brainstorming there are some more interim procedural things that can be done to start getting those trucks off of 15.
What about signs, beware of backups and things like
We're
that?
going to be talking with Quebec Transport about that. This is what I'm going to suggest to you to put in perspective. I think no matter what Quebec Transport does, they can put electronic signage out there. They can put other kinds of signage out there, and they should, and I'm sure they will. And we'll talk about those things Thursday, and I hope to come back with some understandings of things that they are going to do. But having said that, the simple matter is you can do all of those things that you could possibly do in terms of letting people know there's a hazard, but if there's a hazard, then there's a hazard. And it only takes one driver who's unaware of the situation, who may not pay attention for some brief moment. We need to realize one of the things that's different about this commercial border crossing than about Detroit-Windsor, for example, or the Peace Bridge at Buffalo, which has a truck compound where they stage the truck traffic before they let it go across the border, or most of the other major crossings. This one has a high-speed superhighway coming right up to its doorstep. Not a 2-lane windy blacktop to Vermont or whatever. That increases the risk, and we've all been on 15. We all know how we drive on 15 coming back from Montreal. It's not a congested road. It's a very good road. It's very easy to find yourself going 120 kilometers an hour down that road and being very relaxed. You don't see any traffic. It's very open. You don't perceive any risk. And if you're a driver, as this last one was from Ontario, hasn't been through this port, didn't know what to expect, you would just never expect in your wildest imagination that there was a 5-mile truck line, for example, on a given night. It's easy to see how even if you take measures up there, you're still leaving a hazard in place that you're almost predictably going to have things happen. And let's remind ourselves, too, that it isn't just about death. We've had 2 deaths. I don't know how many, but we all know of stories of many other accidents up there. And some of them have affected people's lives very deeply. We saw Ann Williams interviewed by one of you after this last accident from Tower Group in Champlain. A truck went over her car. She's still affected by that. There have been many other accidents up there as well that didn't get the attention because no one died. But each one of them could have been more tragic, and some of them actually still were tragic because they caused a brain injury, they caused other kinds of continuing injuries to people. We can't have that.
One of the intangible hazards also, and I applaud Gary in his video, and Mr. Spiegel brings this up, is that when we're overtaxed by the facility and the staff, we're not able to function properly and interdict the contraband that we're supposed to interdict as an agency. The people that I represent are very frustrated because they feel, rightfully so, that they have to move those trucks off 15, and in doing so, they can't take the amount of time they need to take to interdict the malified loads that are coming through. They're all commingled. And to get to your bus question, on any particular weekend, there's between 100 and 300 buses, depending on how busy the weekend is, commingled with all that traffic. And they have school children, tour groups, and each bus contains about 45 people. If you put that with a fuel tanker, that is a recipe for disaster. Gary's absolutely right. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And this is a national security issue as far as we're concerned. We can't wait. We have to address this as a national security issue and get the people with the facility to make this place work right.
So a big disaster. You think it's going to take a big disaster though before? I mean, one truck link's not going to solve the problem. If they, break ground for one, you think it's going to take a big disaster before they say you got to really start this quickly?
I don't believe, no, I believe we've already started it. I mean, I think these things, these tragedies just accentuate what the problem is. They just show that the problem exists. I don't think any one particular action is going to take and drive this home other than what we're already doing and what Gary's been doing for the last 6 months. These things just show with human tragedy, with a price that is intangible, what's going to happen if we don't address it.
It gives it a whole human dimension. It's one thing to talk about the economic costs of delays of shipping goods, the impact on the region and the stakes of that. It's one thing to talk about numbers, but when you start putting a face on it and you start frankly talking about honest working men screaming and burning to death, and yes, that is what happened, and I will say it, because we need not sugarcoat it, screaming to death in the course of doing their work and trying to cross what is supposedly the friendliest and most open border in the world, there's something wrong with that picture. When it happens twice in 6 months, there's not only something wrong with that picture, there's something tragically wrong with that picture. I don't know if you want to comment on behalf of labor and the Teamsters who are now part of the Federation.
First of all, Gary, we'd like to thank you for the effort that you put forth trying to push this. You're not looking for thanks. I know that you're looking for help. That's why we're here. And you've heard the list of people in different agencies that he's contacted to get that help. The building trades, as I mentioned in an earlier meeting, we built the Port of Excellence up in Champlain in the late 60s, and it's severely outdated. We need to rebuild it. Sure, we're looking for construction jobs for our members, but that's not the real issue here. We're looking at saving some lives. So it's important to keep pushing this. We can't thank Gary enough for the efforts he put forward.
I also have Greg Cato here from Empire State Development. The state's been very helpful. I mentioned the governor's office facilitates and helps us every time we go to Washington with our arrangements. And Jim Mazzarella from the federal office will be with us in our meetings on Wednesday.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Gary also and the Chamber. You know, they just won a recent award from Empire State Development, and the governor is the not-for-profit of the year, the not-for-profit organization of the year for the whole state. Empire State Development was the Plattsburgh Chamber of Commerce, and one of the reasons was because of the activist attitude, like on this issue right here. I mean, we view this as a extremely big threat to the North Country economy. As you know, we've had a lot of success in Plattsburgh through our partnerships between us, Park, and the Development Corporation and others, and we want to keep that up. However, this is a threat to the livelihood of the economy of Plattsburgh, and the governor, as you know, has been very supportive of resolving problems with our partners like Congressman Sweeney and Congressman McHugh. And hopefully someday, Gary can get Congressman Lazio up here when he's taking the tour of the North Country, which I understand is coming soon. So
we have a standing invitation.
Terrific. So I want you folks to know that we're extremely supportive, and I view this as a major issue. And I thank the Chamber for doing all this. Very, very encouraged by what I see and the incredible amount of companies that have really signed on to this. Thank you.
Anything else?
Is there any date set for a groundbreaking on this?
No. We've just been told that it will start sometime in July, but I haven't heard a date.
I imagine we'll get a press release.
I'm sure they will. Not from the border agencies. I feel like a certain congressman from the North Country may be contacting you in that regard.